With me now is the European Commissioner for Trade, Karel de Gucht, and thank you so much for joining us. There's so much concerns actually about inflation and food prices. What do you make of President Sarkozy's proposals to regulate the commodity markets?
I'm a little bit anxious to do that because regulation of that kind of markets has never shown, how would I say, results in the past, so it won't show them in the future either. I believe in open markets, of course, that respond to rules. I mean, it's a difference between respecting rules and regulating. That's not quite the same. So I agree on rules, and it's very important also in the Doha round, for example, that we agree on rules. But regulating means intervening in the markets, and that's not necessarily the good recipe.
We talk a lot about currency wars. Do you believe that we're still in this kind of protectionist stance? And some critics have said that we're in a little bit of a limbo state because the G20 is too large an entity to speak about currency, and the G7 is too small an entity.
Well, first of all, we are going, or we went through the deepest financial and economic crisis since the 30s, and nevertheless, not that much of protectionism showed up. So that's thanks to the WTO and to the rules that have been accepted multilaterally. On the other hand, you see, I wouldn't call it a currency war, but you see discrepancies in between, on the one hand, the rate of the currency and, let's say, the stance of the economy. That's what it's really about. So we have to adjust that, and that's also what we tell, for example, to the Chinese, that they should do so. They have done so, by the way, to a certain extent, since this has become a hot topic, and I'm confident that they will continue doing so in the future, but not only responding, and not merely responding, let's say, to what we ask, but to what they need for internal reasons.
Commissioner, for years Europe has tried to develop some kind of political partnership with China, and it seems that the efforts have somewhat lacked behind. Should we just accept the fact that we will be an economic partner but not much else?
Well, we have a very tense relationship with China, and just before New Year we went to Beijing for the high-level economic dialogue, and that's about all kind of economic topics and trade topics, but all of them are also very geopolitical. Trade, for example, becomes more and more geopolitical. The major part of our relationship with China is about economics in the broader sense of the world. And we have a tense relationship with them, and what you also see is that, for example, when we joined forces with the US, what we have done in several cases, for example, on indigenous innovation, a subject that you are certainly familiar with, well, it showed results, and we have come to an agreement with the Chinese that they should not discriminate on grounds of where the intellectual property rights are originating from. So we can influence them, but then we have to join forces and to be very clear in what we want.
Also on Monday, we're actually expecting the final report on the subsidies that Boeing receives. Has there been any negotiations that will actually lead to something, some kind of concrete action between the EU and the US?
Well, subsidiation is very important. And very detrimental also for international trade. And for example, in the I hope the end game of the Doha negotiations, the European Union will put a lot of emphasis on this subsidiation mechanisms, which are in fact frustrating the level playing field.
Commissioner de Gucht, thank you so much for joining us today.